Many, on both sides of the Atlantic, are haunted by conspiracy theory. That is because we are all victims of the Cold War. Nobody realizes that the Russians fought on two fronts, military and psychological. Distracted by the fear of nuclear annihilation, we have been under covert psychological attack since the last war. The Russians themselves have made no secret of their activities. So-called defectors from the KGB, such as Yuri Bezmenov, have spelt out the strategy. I've put a link to his videos in the sidebar. He clearly states that the object of the KGB has not been espionage, but to demoralize society to such an extent that no one is able to defend the interests of themselves, their family, or their country. Every aspect of society has now been affected: government, civil service, business, mass media, the law, education, and medicine. Doctors have played a fundamental reassuring role in all societies since the beginning of time. As a doctor myself, I have helplessly watched the ideological subversion of clinical practice, which started in Britain in 1948 when I was a schoolboy, with the inception of the National Health Service. By forbidding them from charging patients, family doctors lost the freedom to perform minor operations or pursue particular interests. They were no longer free to suture lacerations, for example, and my father had to junk his X-ray machine. 95% of people who do not feel very well and decide to consult their doctor can still only be assessed by clinical judgment. Any blood tests, X-rays, and other scientific investigations that are performed to clarify the diagnosis are invariably negative. The big unknown in modern medicine is not cancer or heart disease, as everyone has been led to believe, but the cause of all those niggling nerves, coughs, and collywobbles. Everyone suffers collywobbles at some time or another, regardless of race, religion, or social class. Occasionally, an individual becomes abnormally anxious or hypochondriacal about such symptoms, perhaps spooked by something they saw, heard, or read. They become obsessed by the notion that there is something more seriously wrong. It is the commonest problem for which patients seek advice. In Britain, before the NHS, and until the reforms of 1968, reassurance was available from any GP next morning, next afternoon, or next evening. To be examined and reassured, patients simply sat in the surgery and waited their turn. Then in Britain in 1968, in order to promote the dignity and status of the workers, doctors were induced to adopt appointment systems. Patients could no longer pop into the doctor on the way home from work. They had to make an appointment. 5 minutes were set aside for problems that could be resolved in a couple of minutes, so that appointments quickly became fully booked. Patients were fobbed off to tomorrow or the day after. In effect, the cheapest, quickest, and most effective reassurance for the commonest clinical problem in the world became unavailable. Hypochondriacal anxiety became bottled up and brooded about, with patients resorting to self-medication. The modern market in alternative medicine was created. But there have been far more serious and expensive consequences. All being well, I'll detail them in another video.